Hey everyone, thanks for attending. There were no pre-submitted questions today, so if anybody has a question, please just drop it in the chat, raise your hand, speak up. I'll be happy to do my best to answer it. I'll give everyone a few minutes to join, but in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to speak up or drop them in the chat. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I put a message in the chat. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to ask them. I'll be happy to try to cover them to the best of my knowledge. But I see it's 5 minutes after. If there are no questions, I can go through and demo a few things. If there's any suggestions on what you guys would like to see demoed, feel free to drop those in the chat as well. So I guess I can just kind of go into a couple demoing a few different things. So one thing that's pretty common, so I'll say from the professional service side, and it's not utilized as much, is using run report steps over fetch entity steps. So let me go ahead and go into decisions and show how this could be utilized and why it could be beneficial. Cool. Just want to make sure, can everybody still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Cool. Thank you. So one reason you could utilize a run report step over a fetch entities is, let's say you have a data set and you want to specifically filter it down with an is in list filter. On versions of 7, there currently isn't that option on our fetch entity step. However, I know it is in newer versions of 8, where it is coming out in a release pretty soon. But on other versions of 7, which is pretty common right now for our customers, you can use a run report step to get that data. So let's go ahead and just create a report right now. So let's just call this, let's do a report of the account structure. We'll just call it in list because we're going to put a filter onto it. Here we can go ahead and add a couple of different filters. Let's do email. Let's do first name. First name. And let's do created on date as well. Okay, so let's say these are the 3 fields we want on our report, and we want to do an in list filter to pass it a list of first names essentially. And we could filter it this way. So let's go ahead and put an is in list filter. So let's do first name. First. So we could do let's fetch or let's load accounts where first name is in list. So for reporting purposes while you're building, by default, you're going to show no data if you don't have any values within the filter settings. But if you click this toggle here, you'll still be able to run, you'll see all data without applying a filter. So what we'd want to do to utilize this as a run report step is change this runtime behavior to runtime editable. This is now going to give us an input on this step to pass in a list of first names. So I'm just going to put, we're just going to do a get accounts where Emma and Dylan are the first names. So let's save this real quick. Open a new tab. And let's build a flow. So what you would want to do is now drag out a run report step here. Just do run report. What this step now is going to allow you to do is specify which report you want to run, and if there's runtime filters, they will now pop up as input. So we're going to specifically go ahead and choose our recent account report is in list. Off, click back on. Let's see, and you can see now there's an input here for a list of first names. So just as that example I'll show you, I'll pass in two constant names, Dylan and Emma. So with the run report step, there's a couple of different output options you can use. So if you were trying to run a report just to get an export, an Excel file, you have that option here. So you can return the data as an Excel file, a CSV file, a PDF. However, if you want to utilize this report data within a workflow, you can specify by selecting a type, or you can do dynamic data rows. And I'll kind of go over each of those. So for the first time, we'll just go over data rows because that will just output automatically for us. So let's debug this, save it and debug. Let's view the output. So now you can see the output of this report was our 3 account entities with just the report data that was filtered now by first name, Dylan and Emma. So this is beneficial, whereas if we were trying to do a fetch entity step to get all accounts where first name equals, the way you'd have to approach it currently is by taking your list of names and for eaching and hitting a fetch step multiple times. So sometimes, depending on the size of your data load, that won't be the most performant, and this will get you a better and more performant solution for that. So now let's kind of go over how you can work with this data. So there's a few things with it. So right now we selected dynamic data rows. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with dynamic data rows, but if you were to look at them in the Data Explorer, you can see here, it's kind of, you'll have field 1 through 99. And the reason that's set up is it's because it's set up to essentially just be dynamic. There could be fields, and at that time you wouldn't really know where everything is. So what I mean by that is field 1, you would have to know what column 1 is on your report. So if column 1 was email address, you would then have to assume or know that field 1 in this dynamic data row is going to be email address, and kind of so on. So sometimes that's easy to work with because you don't have report data that changes constantly. But now let's say you have a couple of instances where you're working with dynamic data rows and the data could change. Let's see. Oh, I see one question. So how can we map in more than 99 fields? So with the dynamic data row, unfortunately, I don't believe there is a way. I think that's a hard limitation. To get more than 99 fields in, you could use a import CSV or Excel step. I'm not sure if there's a DTN to get that more or what that looks like. But to get more than 99 fields, specifically with CSV files, you would have to choose a data type to map that to. So good question. Why is it hard coded? Honestly, I don't have the answer to that. That's something that I don't really have a background to why it's like that. But there are some ways to work around it. So one, you could specify a data structure with more than 99 fields on it, and you can have it map to that with an import step. Another way to get around that on a run report step specifically, you could have 100 columns specified, and at that point, you would get to one of these other options of, instead of returning data rows, you would return a specific data type. So CSV to list mapping, let's take a look. I think you're right with it being limited as well. I think you're right though, that is limited. There's some other steps though. So to get around that, I know there's a bunch of CSV import steps, so I could kind of go through those. Let's see. Data, Excel, CSV. So personally, I have not worked with CSV to list. I think I know that it is, or list to CSV. Okay, let's try that too. I'll drag them all out. Okay, list to CSV. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I do see that's a limitation there. Let's find a solution to that. See which other one of our steps could work around that for you. So with that limitation, let's maybe just go through an example. Do you have a specific example where you have more than those fields, or more than 99 that you would want to kind of test out? We can try to work through this together because I'm actually genuinely curious now. Let's just go in and create a test. If I have a test sheet we can work with here. Build one real quick on this other screen. Okay, just building a sheet right now, and I'm going to put more than 9. Oh, that seems to be frozen now. Okay, so I can't actually build a sheet right now. Something's frozen over there. But let's try to go through an example where you can output more than 49 properties, since that list to CSV is limited there. One way is to manually build an Excel sheet, which isn't the most intuitive. It's not a straightforward process. So let's see if there's a step we can utilize here. Would these objects be defined decisions data types that you're working with more than 49 properties? Because if that's the case, I could say we could build a report then with all of those possible fields and have it run that way, and it will generate the Excel sheet for you. That's one benefit to the run report step. You could specify more than 49 columns there. Let's see what else. So I think to get around that, I would use a run report step, specify it. But if it is a blocker for you with that 49 field hard limit, I would submit a support ticket. I believe we might have a DT in for it to get it improved, or we can help you kind of work through it, just because I don't have the answer to that right now. So flow structure is not database stored, but let's actually see if we could report on a flow structure. That's a great question, and let me build one real quick. Flow structure report. I'm just gonna put well, you wouldn't necessarily need to create a report source flow here. You could, I believe, actually, okay, yeah, you would. That's the downfall. I'm sorry about that. So would you be directly reporting on this data for visibility purposes, or is your sole purpose just to get an export of it? Got it. So just to get an export of some kind was. It's not showing up. Let's see. It wouldn't be here, but. Okay, let's think through this. Can't report on it. How would you get your export? So let's work through this. So one way, possibly, this is just me thinking through on the fly here, is you take in your list of your object with more than 49 fields. So for each item in that list, we would have an Excel. You could have maybe a template or different. Let's see real quick. believe there's a set row. Where's that? Set values in row. So let's say you have an object, you have a Excel file that you built, and it has all of your headers, 1 through, let's just say 110. You could supply it with a list here of your new values, and in here you pass in kind of just a string list of here's all the values 1 through 110. And you could build it that way. You'd loop through and say add a row, and loop through that way to manually build out your Excel file. That's one way to approach it. That way is kind of a bit more of a manual process because you're manually building out. But off the top of my head and from my experience, I don't exactly have know about a specific step that gets around that list to CSV limitation of 49 fields. Does that kind of help you with an idea of how to get around that, or do you kind of want me to, or would you like me to build out the full thing right here on the call with you, just to show you? Okay, yeah. I'm not exactly sure the reasoning behind that hard coding value of 99 and 49. It is a little strange, but I know it has actually been a complaint before, and I believe it's getting addressed. And if not, I will make sure a DT is submitted for that reason. So I believe there is one. I'll just have to search after this call to make sure. Okay, so another thing with the run report step that's actually kind of uncommon. So let me go back to this example of running this report. If we were to edit it, you could say for this account structure, I want these 3 fields. Let me see where it's at. You go to report access and click generate step to run report. You can give it a type name. So you could say count fields for report. What this will do is it generates just a flow structure, a data type. So when you run this report step, you'll have those 3 fields in an object for you to work with. Save and show this. Let's just wait for this to save. Okay. Save now. Select a type. Let me actually drag out a new run report step and select this type. So, okay, so now it's ready to go, that type. Let's pick our report, pick our existing, pick recent. Account is in report list. You can see right now we have Excel file, but we want to select a type. And you can see since we clicked on the report settings itself that we wanted to specify a type, the decisions has generated a type for us now called account fields for report, whatever you named for it. And if you look in the data explorer, let's see, I click off, let's run it and we could see this object now will have those 3 fields. Let's see, I don't think I supplied it anything, but yep. So we can see our output is an object with the 3 fields that were on the report. So that is one thing that could be beneficial. A good scenario for that is, let's say you have a large object and you're reporting, you want to use an in-list filter on it, and specifically you only want to use a couple of the fields. You could use that generate type option, and what it would do is just create a new structure for you to work with the couple of fields you have for running with that. So let's see. Also, if we use dynamic data row type in create data, why is that not really useful? So let's go to create data and drag out a dynamic data row as the type. Drag out a create data. So if you were to specify this with the create data, let's see. I don't think you would actually be able to build the data on it. Maybe if you were to have constant data, you could fill out. Yeah, I don't think it allows you to actually build that row out for you. So that would be one thing. So I believe the ways you can generate the dynamic data rows is through a run report step, an import CSV step, which is utilizing the loop, or there's a new step which is import. Let's see. There's a step now that you can import in Excel directly to dynamic data rows. So I don't actually know the reason behind why you can't create dynamic data rows with the create data step. That's a really good point as well. I unfortunately don't have the answer to that. But let me just show that one step we were just talking about right here. Convert Excel or CSV to dynamic data rows. This will allow you, kind of like the other import steps, allow you to specify a file and it will just automatically go into a list of dynamic data rows. Previously, if you wanted to convert a file to a list of dynamic data rows, you'd have to utilize the for each Excel or CSV row step. However, this row will let you do it all at once. One benefit to that is, instead of running through a for each loop, you could take your dynamic data rows, drop them into a run flows for list, and process multiple at a time. If performance and is a concern there, you can run some data rows in parallel and do whatever logic you need to them. Okay, so I know I covered a lot about just these different steps. Unfortunately, I don't have the answers to why we can't use dynamic data rows with create data, or really the limitations there. My suggestion would be to really get the answer, maybe submit a support ticket. They'll be able to kind of hunt that down, possibly with the dev team, and get you a definite answer on why it's like that. But are there any other questions or anything that we want to cover with the rest of the time? Another great question, which unfortunately I don't have the answer to. So why anytime we use file data type in decisions, it creates a temp file? Unfortunately, I don't also know the answer to that. I know it's kind of been the thing. I believe it has something to do with file reference. I'm not exactly sure the reasoning behind all of that. But that's another great question. I'm sorry I don't have the answer to that right now. I would recommend a support ticket to get the exact answer to that. Okay, are there any other questions? Let's see. Would NVelocity work in an async flow? Great question. Let's go ahead and try that. I personally don't know. Just build a subflow. Let's build a flow. Go into here. Create new. Choose. So let's see. Do you have a specific example of what you'd want to put into the template for this? Let's just put something. Cool. Let's just, you haven't used this step in a while. Let's see. Let's just drop something in here. It's been a really long time since I've used this. Output test. Okay, and let's now log this message. And this way we can kind of see what's happening. So log. So if we run an async, we can still log in and kind of see what was going on there. I'm just going to put it as error. I'm just going to call this. And we'll put the merge string here. Okay. Go ahead and save this. Save. Let's debug it. Just make sure it's working as we expect. It logs. Let's go to our logs real quick. Admin, system tools, logging, LNL test, we could see there. Okay, let's now call this subflow to run asynchronously. Let's do, I don't want link, where's, let's go ahead and try this now. Debug. Okay, so we spun it off to run asynchronously. So I do see that it did work. So I think that hopefully it wasn't a very complex test of the step, but it did see, we can see that it actually ran within an async flow. Okay, are there any other questions? If there aren't any more questions, I think we can go ahead and call it a day. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining.